So people unfamiliar with Hawaii's food history may wonder where our famous love of spam comes from, because it's just something that's not really natural. And usually a culture's food ways comes from what's given by the land and sea. So something like poke makes sense because we can catch fish, and poi and luau makes sense because it comes from the roots and leaves of the taro. But spam is something totally artificial. But today I'm going to share with you, actually it's not a Hawaiian dish, but a Korean dish, but it reflects kind of a similar history that starts with war, actually. So during World War II, there was food rationing, and in Hawaii, meat was hard to come by. And so we relied on canned meats that were shelf stable and you could have it anytime. And in Korea, the same thing happened after the Korea War, where people were starving, but they relied on American food aid, and that came in the form of canned goods. So things like spam and Vienna sausage and even hot dogs and stuff like that. And so whereas in Hawaii, we just used the spam as is. I mean, we were like a Western territory. Right, Western territory. So we used the spam like an entree. So we had our spam, which was our meat component, and we served it with rice because the spam could go a long way. It was so salty, and so you could just stretch it and use it in many ways. But most people just eat it like as a breakfast food now with rice and eggs. But in Korea, they combined it with their own ingredients, and they just threw all the processed meat in a pot with kimchi and other vegetables, and they created this beautiful stew which has the name Budae Jjigae, which translates as army base stew. And the ingredients are mostly processed, and for a while after the war it fell out of favor, but then people who remembered it missed it, and so it's back. And so I'm going to show you how to make it today. Before we go, I just wanted to say that this dish intrigues me because it grew out of hardship, and it kind of reminds me of the time that we're going through now, like these COVID times where we are going through a hardship, and it is changing the way we live and the way we eat. And I just kind of wonder what is going to come out of this moment. And so it's kind of interesting to me that we might have our own Budae Jjigae tradition or spam tradition, not exactly, but something that comes out of this that sticks over time. And so I'm curious as to what that might be. And this is just a strange moment, and one of those moments we'll reflect on like 20 years or 30 years from now and say, hey, this came out of that time. And so it's just totally interesting to me. So these are some of the ingredients we're using. So the army stew is so popular that they even have like packaged army stew kind of ramen noodle. But actually this is not what I'm going to be using today. I'm going to be using this crab flavored one, because Koreans typically they start their broth with a fish broth, so they're using anchovies, and so I think the crab flavor will enhance that. So to start, we're gonna use the anchovies, and about 10 of them. I'm gonna throw it into this pot with about 4 cups of water. So for the anchovy, you want to remove the head and the guts, because that is what's gonna make it bitter. So like some people might not mind, but I don't want a bitter soup, so I'm taking that off. Okay, so I have about 10 anchovies in the pot, and then I'm gonna open my ramen, and then actually it has these packets. So there's that crab thing, and whatever sauce this is, I'm sure it will go with the soup, so I'll just pour that in. Usually the Koreans would make their broth with seaweed, but because I have this crab flavor, I'm skipping that seaweed part. but usually you use about a 6-inch sheet. So this has chili, light chili, and a lot of salt in it already. So I'm not going to be adding any extra salt to my stew because it already will have a lot of salt in this broth, and plus all the processed meat has a lot of salt and sugar in it already. So I'm just going to add this in. And this is kind of like dried crab bits and stuff, so that looks good. So I'm just gonna set this boiling and then come back and make a chili paste. So for the chili paste, I'm gonna start with about 1 heaping tablespoonful of gochujang. And to that, I'm gonna add about 1 tablespoon of shoyu, a splash of mirin, and then this is 2 tablespoons of Korean red chili pepper flake. This is where you could also add salt if you want, but I don't think this stew is going to need extra salt because the ingredients are so salty by themselves. So then you want to add in like minced garlic. The recipes usually call for like just 1 clove of garlic, but you know me, I love garlic, so this is about 3 cloves in here. And you want to boil those anchovies for about 10 minutes. And then some people actually remove the anchovies, but I don't mind eating them, so I'm just going to leave it in there. Otherwise, if you don't want to see the fish in your stew, just strain it out. Okay, first I have just 1 onion that I'm just layering in this pan here. You just need to slice it. You don't need to like mince it or anything like that. So just layer it. Just layer it around the bottom. So some people will arrange your ingredients in pockets so they have this beautiful presentation. But I just want to layer everything so I don't have to do a lot of stirring of the pot to get everything I want. So first I have the Portuguese sausage, which is a mild one because the stew is hot in itself and spicy, and it kind of depends on who's in your family or who's going to be eating it, because some people can't take spicy, so you want to be a little bit considerate. Like if it were me, I would have everything spicy in there, like spicy spam, spicy Portuguese sausage, and you can use any kind of processed meat. But that's the spirit of it. You don't want to use like fresh cuts because that is not army surplus. So yeah, just pick everybody's favorite meat. It might be Vienna sausage, or it might be deviled ham. It could even be bologna, whatever you want to eat. It's a very user-friendly dish. Now that's kind of a lot of meat, and so I'm thinking now, even though I bought these hot dogs, and these are like chicken and pork hot dogs, so it's a little bit healthier, I guess, if it's not all pork, but it still has that pork flavor. But since there's so much in there and I still have to add the spam, I think I'm gonna skip the hot dogs today. So here comes the spam, the famous pink loaf that Hawaii people love to eat. We eat 7 million cans of it every year. And you're just gonna wanna slice it thin. And then you're just gonna wanna cut everything in half. And also layer that in your pot. Now you can see I've added in the tofu, and next comes like the green onions. You can use 1/4 to 1/2 cup. I'm also gonna add garlic to our pot, just the whole raw cloves. Like you can use 1 head of garlic and just toss that in there. because it's really good for your immunity anyway. So eating like raw garlic, and a lot of it is good. So I'm just going to throw everything in there. Okay, and then I'm adding like our kimchi. So just kind of spread it around. 1 cup of it is fine. That looks pretty good. Everything is covered. Yeah. So this is what that is looking like at this point. And this is like a smaller pan than you should use, but it's like an induction like top. And so this is like the only size my mom had here in her house, which is better than me because I don't even have such equipment, so I only have a stove top. But you can do this on the stove top too, just in a bigger pan, or if you're eating for yourself, just make a smaller portion. So instead of buying a really big can of beans that I might never eat, I bought this little can of beanie weenie. So it was just as well that I didn't add the hot dog, because this has the hot dog pieces in it, and underneath you'll have the beans. And so if you want just beans alone, you can just get any kind of pinto bean or pork and beans, as long as it's canned, because that's what it's all about. And it's like amazing that they gave this like kind of American invention a totally Korean flavor, and just came up with this brilliant way of using it. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to take some of our gochujang paste, and we're just going to spread it on top as well. Yeah. I want to make sure I get every last bit. This is what we're gonna cook up. I'm just gonna put it on the burner and add our broth that we had made earlier, and we will be good to go. The broth really does smell crabby, so I'm just going to start pouring the broth over this. So when it starts coming to a boil, that's when you can add your ramen. Yes. So there you go, Korean Army stew, Budae Jjigae. Hope you get a chance to make it at home. Thanks for joining me in this session. Bye.